Hi, my name is David Marks. Welcome to my woodworking school here in Santa Rosa, Northern California. Today, I want to show you how I took 1/16 inch veneer, cut it on the bandsaw, and I'll take you through my process of how I cut it and glued it on a 6-inch diameter radius dome surface. So follow along and I'll take you through the process step by step. Here's an example of how I cut thick veneer on my 20-inch bandsaw. I have the fence set up for the drift so I can make a nice straight cut. It's important to maintain a nice, constant, steady, slow feed rate in order to get a smooth surface. I glued up 2 pieces of 1-inch thick Baltic birch plywood and turned it to match the shape of this contour gauge. Then I used double stick tape to attach a piece of 1/8 inch thick poplar plywood and trace the shape onto it. This will be my template. With the template, I can draw my pattern onto the wood. I had to cut the veneer into 2 3-inch wide pieces in order for it to be able to take a compound bend. This is my glue of choice, Unibond 800. I write the date on the resin and store it in my shop refrigerator so it will last longer. So everything is prepped and ready for the glue up. We've got our quilted mahogany veneer and the turned plywood substrate. I've already mixed the glue, which is the Unibond 800. And now what I'll do is to begin to apply this to the substrate. I've taped everything in place. That way I don't have to worry about alignment. I can just apply the glue and not have to worry about it slipping and sliding. This Unibond 800 is a catalyzed glue, and it doesn't contain water like other glues do. It's a resin that is catalyzed with a brown colored catalyst. It has great gap filling abilities, and it dries to a nice rigid glue line. This is a bandsaw veneer that is from the tree, otherwise known as quilted mahogany. And this is 1/16 of an inch thick. And what I've discovered is that if I bandsaw the veneer to a 1/16 inch thickness and coat it with this glue, I can bend it over a compound curve. It's not a dramatic curve, it's a gentle curve, but it will bend in 2 directions. But you need a fair amount of force to do that, and that's why we'll be using the vacuum press. As you can see, I like my glue. I'd rather have some extra glue on there to fill in any voids and have some squeeze out. And also the glue on the veneer will start to soften the veneer and make it flexible. And that way it can conform to this compound curve. So that's looking pretty good. A little bit more just for good luck. And now we're ready. So I'll lower this down, and you can see it's hinged in place with some packing tape. And this is the platen. The platen has been covered with packing tape, and that will prevent any glue from sticking to it. It's also covered with a plastic mesh, and this is for airflow because we need that bag to have pressure on top because it's going to bend it on 2 planes. It'll conform this way, and it's also going to bend this way. So the base of it, there's some rope there to get airflow around the base. I put down some wax paper so any glue that squeezes out won't stick to the platen. I've also got tape here to deal with any squeeze out. So I'll put it into the bag, get this ready for vacuum pressure. Before I seal the bag, I'll take a sponge. I'm just going to wet the inside of this bag, and this will just help to get the polyurethane bag to stick to itself and seal up really well. And I'll get any dust off if there was dust on there. That should do it. Okay. Now my fasteners are here. Take this guy and set him here. Fold that over. Here. Make sure I have a little bit sticking out on each end. And then this is how I clamp it. This is just one of these C-shaped plastic locks to lock the bag down. Alright, now I can use my bricks to kind of manipulate the bag a little bit. There. That's here. One more there. So when I turn on the vacuum pressure, it's going to get airflow up on top here, and it'll pull all that down, and you'll see it clamping that veneer to the form pretty rapidly. So watch these edges as it pulls down here. You can see how that grid work supplies airflow, and it's pulling down tight around the perimeter. I'm using the router freehand to remove the squeeze out from the vacuum press. I put a piece of blue tape down first to serve as a guideline to route to. This is some of that strong, heavy-duty turner's tape. And I'll use this to hold the adjacent veneer in place. Line it up here and get it close. That's where my grain match is. And I'll use that to hold it down. Apply some pressure. So I put a piece of packing tape over the top of the veneer just to support it a bit. And I've got my fence, which is a piece of 1/8 inch thick Italian bending poplar plywood, which is flexible. And I have this double stick tape, so it's spaced just the right amount from that cut line. So I can take this 1/8 inch spiral bit, and I've got a light mounted on my router. And then I can run this up against the fence. The cutter will land right in the middle. It'll take a little bite from each side of the veneer, and these will fit together perfectly. So I'll turn the light on. There we go. So these should mate together perfectly now. So as you can see with the little masking tape, I was able to pull those two pieces together tightly. My next step is I'll take it to the vacuum press and mix up some glue and glue on the second half. So you can see this is the glue side, and I have this veneer pulled tight with a piece of clear packing tape. It's hinged right in the middle, so that after I put the glue on it, I'll be able to fold it down. But I'll need more clamping pressure across the sides, so I'll add more packing tape, here and here. Okay, I've got some glue mixed up. This is the Unibond 800, which I like quite a bit. It's a slow setting, gap filling glue. It'll fill in any voids. And I've got plenty of working time, so you don't have to worry about being in a rush. I usually have a good half an hour of working time with this glue. And what I like about it mostly is that it dries to a rigid glue line, a rigid bond. Unlike some of the other glues, the yellow glues, the white glues, those aren't technically a rigid glue line. They're more of a semi-rigid, which means they're semi-flexible, and your glue joints can open up over time. I've seen it happen, so I stick with this stuff. All right, now I'll put some on the quilted mahogany, and what this will do is to soften that veneer. The veneer is something that I cut on the bandsaw. It's 1/16 of an inch thick, and it's a nice thick veneer, but it's a little stiff, but it will bend if you add the slow setting glue to it. What it does is it slowly soaks into the fibers, and it'll soften the fibers. And that, plus the force of the vacuum press, is going to ensure that this goes down onto a compound surface here. A little bit of glue on those edges. Make sure we don't have any starved glue joints here. And a little bit more over here. This coiled rope at the bottom is going to help to increase the airflow so that we get lots of airflow up here. And that's what we'll need for the vacuum to reach its maximum force of 1,500 pounds per square foot. That's a lot of force. Okay, that looks good. Take this guy and flip him over. So again, he's hinged right in the middle. I've already very carefully taken care of the alignment. I don't want to have to guess at that once it's all covered with glue. And I'll rub the tape down for a better bond. And then use this essentially as my clamp to pull those joints tight. And put that down there. Another one for this side. You've got to do it this way because it's on a curve, and you can't put all the masking or all the packing tape on at once, because then it won't be able to fold back over. Now I'll really put some force on this guy. Again, this is our clamping pressure that pulls those joints tight. And now we'll do a little bit more for good luck, just to make sure it's really getting pulled tight together. Over here. Okay. And rub that down. And that should go together pretty nicely. This is the platen, which is basically this 1/8 inch Italian bending poplar plywood covered with with that plastic mesh, which allows the airflow to come right up on top of it. So I'll get this into place, secure that. And put one more over here. Okay. And there's our assembly. And now it goes into the bag. I've got wax paper on top of my grid, so I'm going to put it right there, because there probably will be some glue squeeze out, no doubt. And we don't want that sticking to the bag. I've reattached the faceplate to the plywood block that I've done the veneering on. Now I'll put it back on the lathe so we can trim this and sand it. Got to be careful of these sharp edges here. And that glue is pretty sharp. Alright. Now that it's secure and in place, we're going to use a skew in the horizontal mode to trim this and smooth up those edges. But first we need to sharpen this. So let's head over to the grinder and I'll show you how I sharpen this. The skew makes an excellent negative rake scraper. It's got a 20-degree bevel on both sides, and the key to this is that you need to grind it every time you use it, because what will happen is that you're going to put a burr up on top, you're going to cut, and after about a minute that burr is going to get dull. Then you go back to the grinder and you sharpen it again. Now, in order to get that burr on the leading edge where we need it, I've identified this as the top side. So when we grind it, we're going to put the top down, grind that side first, then we're going to flip it over with the top side up and grind it again. That's going to put the burr right up on top where we need it. Here we go. I'll put some Sharpie on here. That'll tell us when we've made it all the way out to the edge. Okay, so top side down first. This is a cubic boron nitrate wheel. So pivot into the curve, do it one more time. Take my thumb, hold it down to the platen. Pivot into the grinder, it's looking good. Now we're going to do the second one with the bottom side down. Yeah, one more. Okay, we've got a nice, clean, sharp edge, and that puts the burr up on the top side right where we need it. So whenever you do veneer work, there's always going to be some glue that squeezes out around the edges. And it's no different when you work in the vacuum press. So now that all this glue is cured and everything's hardened up, I've got it mounted back on the lathe, and I'm going to use my skew to trim this off. Okay, so it's important to get the tool rest set up just right. With the skew in horizontal mode, we want to be cutting just about at center. And again, as I explained before, we're going to be cutting with this leading edge right here. And this is what's going to allow us to do a precise cut coming in this way. And what I'll do is as I hold the skew, I'm going to line it up parallel to the ways of the bed. And that'll get me oriented to do a nice straight cut here. There's also likely to be some glue flying around, so I'll put on my safety shield here. Okay, so we should be set up. And start out with slow speed. And turn that up. Typically, the faster you go, the cleaner the cut will be. All right, just a nice steady pass. So move it over a little bit. Yeah, so that worked out well. We've got a clean outside perimeter. I can shape the rest of this later on. So my next step is I want to sand this and get that surface smooth. So I'll show you how I set up my sanding disc. So when I'm sanding veneer or any curved surface, a lot of times what I like to use is a flexible sanding strip. The way that I make those is I take some plywood, and this is 1/8 inch thick Italian bending poplar plywood. So it's 3 layers of poplar, and it's designed to bend in both directions, but it's a little stiff across the length, but it's very flexible across the width. So you can take this and cut off a strip so it's, going across the width of it, more flexible that way. And I'm going to use a roll of some 120 grit self-adhesive sandpaper. So this has got a sticky surface to it. And I'll just take the plywood, set it down on here, and then cut it with a knife, box cutter. A couple of strokes here to score that. Okay, and now I've got a nice flexible sanding strip. So I'll take this over and sand that veneer. So I'm going to cover the surface with some chalk, and that way I'll be able to tell, where I've been and where I haven't been. So just go across here, across like so. And since it is going to be a bit dusty, I'll put on my dust mask and then go to it with a flexible sanding strip. I also want to have the speed a little bit slower for sanding. So I can take this and hold on to it with one hand here, and then use the other to start to smooth and blend the surface. Usually want to keep my pressure in the lower area right around 7 o'clock. And then I'll occasionally bring it to the center to blend that. I think I could increase the speed a little. You can still see I need a little more in the middle. Okay, let's see what that did. Pretty nice, just a little bit more glue on these two surfaces here. So I'll chalk these up a bit. I'll try the other end. Pretty close. Just a little bit more right here. All right, looking pretty good. I'm gonna wet this with a little water. You'll be able to see just how beautiful that grain is and how snugly that joint came out. Now, keep in mind that sanding it with 120 is kind of a rough grit, but that was just to remove the glue and to flush up the surface. So eventually when I'm done with this test piece, I'm going to probably sand it up to 1,000 grit, and the wood will really glow. But just so you can get an initial idea of what this quilted mahogany looks like, I'm going to wet it with some water and then wipe it off. So this wood is known for its depth and three-dimensionality, and it's some pretty insane stuff. You can see that reptilian grain right in there, just sort of a vein that's developed in the wood. Pretty amazing material. So my intent for making this small 6-inch diameter veneered piece was to have a test piece to practice my inlay techniques for my wall sculpture project. Now on my wall sculpture commission, it's a 3-foot diameter piece, and I was commissioned to veneer it in this very rare wood called quilted mahogany, also known as the tree. And there's a whole story about this that we'll tell you about later. But basically, there was one tree that was found in the Chicopul jungles of Belize back in 1965, and it was later harvested in 1985. And when it came into California, I bought quite a few board feet of this material, and I've sawn this into veneer that's 1/16 of an inch thick, and figured out a way to press this onto a compound curving surface. Also, part of that commission is to do an inlay, and one of the inlays is going to be a jellyfish. Now the jellyfish is going to be done in mother of pearl for all these lacy pieces that are hanging down, and then some power shell, which comes from New Zealand. That's going to be the top kind of bubble of the fish. And then this black lipped mother of pearl, which I'll use for this black border down here at the base. And what I want to do is to practice on this piece before I do it on the expensive wall sculpture.